We're rolling.
What in the world is it like growing up in Massillon, Ohio?
It was a pretty regular kid childhood. You know, it was just a lot of playing outside, you know, riding bikes,
Right.
you know, building forts and stuff like that. And, you know, regular summer job kind of stuff, you know, regular plain brown rapper, American mid-'80s childhood, I guess. Very Midwestern, very normal, you know.
And your dad, obviously, big
Yeah,
guitar
my
player.
dad has kind of got it bad. And this is just what's up.
Right.
Like, this rotates out.
So you obviously grew up around it.
Absolutely.
Big bluegrass guy, right?
Well, Dad, I mean, we listened to a lot of bluegrass because that was what Dad could, like, if you wanted to see live music, you know, you couldn't, you know, you got 3 kids at home and you're working, you can't go, like, you know, go out to bars and see bands. And Dad wasn't really, Dad was into folk music and acoustic music. And I mean, is. Like, and so his, like, he stopped buying Dylan records when he went electric.
Okay.
Like, he has all before Highway 61. And, like, so that's, and he was really into Pete Seeger and like, the groups like the Kingston Trio and stuff like that. But then through that, we found other, like, you know, older and rootsier stuff. But he would take me to the Kent State Folk Festival, and we would go up there and hang out all day. And then we would jam in the hallways with guys, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So that was the main reason I went to Kent State. You know, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I, you know, got out of high school. I know I wanted to play guitar. Middle of college, I definitely wanted to be Lightnin Hopkins. I heard it, and I was just like, this is crazy sounding. Is that an acoustic guitar? Is that an electric guitar? Or, like, what is this? And this guy, this voice that sounded like I never heard anything like it. And I'd heard Leadbelly at the time, and I thought that's, you know, it was cool, and I enjoyed that, and I liked the way he played guitar. So it sounded like almost like a piano. But Lightnin Hopkins was just sort of a different thing, because it was so spare, and it was so self-assured. Like, you could tell, like, this guy was cool. And, you know, like, I want to be cool. And then I saw a picture of him on a record, and I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest. This is the epitome of cool. This is like double Fonzie, you know, wearing those dark glasses and that, you know, little fedora like there, you know, and like playing cool Gibson guitar, you know, cigarette hanging out his mouth, you know. This guy, I think it's a Norma. This is the, I believe this is the first electric guitar that, I remember my dad brought it home from a student. My dad was an industrial arts teacher when I was a kid, and he had a kid who brought it into shop because he knew Dad played guitar. And the bridge, you can see the bridge hole right there. It was way off, so it would never ever play in tune. And he brought it to my dad, and I don't know whether the kid just left it or he just you know, or Dad bought it off him for something, and but he brought it home, and he you know, fixed it so he intonate, and that was the electric guitar that was around as a kid. It was the only electric guitar I'd ever seen, like, in person as a kid, and started to play it a little bit, and have this he plugged into this tube record player, like and that had a 1/4-inch jack on it, and it actually is a really great sounding amplifier. So that was sort of the first electric guitar I got to play. I've had the advantage, like, I remember when I was just about in college, I had some friends who had VHS tapes of these old folklorists, like Alan Lomax recorded some of the, like, the blues players that he brought to Newport Folk Festival, and then he also and then guys like Stephen Grossman and his guitar. He had this thing called Stephen Grossman's Guitar Workshop, where he would do these instructional videos, but he also licensed these performances of, you know, they'd find footage of these old guys like Son House and Booker White and Skip James and Mississippi John Hurt and Fred McDowell and all these things. So I could actually look and see what their hands were doing. And I've wore those tapes out, good old VHS tapes. And that was a huge jumping off point for me. one, to be able to embrace, being able to see that and absorb that. But I'm getting that through media. I never met or ever got to hang out with any of those guys. Now, mind you, I was actively seeking out any of like living guys around that, you know, that played. And you'd be amazed, because also that generation of guys, because there wasn't a lot of entertainment, it made people want to entertain, and people got together more often to like hang out. Like people hang out on porches. Like I read in a Merle Haggard book, he said air conditioning ruined neighborhoods. Oh, I thought that was such a cool thing. He said because everyone used to hang out on their porch in the evening. So you always saw your neighbor. You always said hi to him. You said yes sir, no man. And he said, and then everyone went inside their house and never came back out.
And played music.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so strange before pop culture and the video culture that music was just a thing you did.
That was the entertainment.
Right.
Or, you know, movie theater. What else is there?
You touched on the regionality of music and how that can influence people. And here, there was a guy, Mike Lenz.
I met him at the Kent State Folk Festival.
Right.
He was, I think he was dating another musician friend of mine that I knew, and was playing with another guitar player and learning from a guy named John Mosey, who is another fantastic fingerstyle guitar player. He'll play swing jazz and stuff like that, and Django Reinhardt, and he'll play killer blues, but he'll also play like old-time fiddle tunes, like flat-picking kind of stuff. So I knew Mike from him, and so Mike and I got to be pals, and would pick a little together, and you know, we'd sit in, we'd go show up, you know, have a drink at one another's gigs, and sit in, and you know, just, you know, hang out, talk about guitars and stuff. And he's like, there's this kid, you got to see this kid named Dan. He's been coming, he's been playing, he sometimes plays at the bus stop in Akron, and I've been giving him a couple lessons, and he's been sitting in on my gigs. He's real into Junior Kimbrough and all this cool stuff, and you know, I was like, yeah, man. I said, well, you know, like, have him come by on a Monday or something. I was holding down a Monday residency in Kent at a bar called Muggs, which is the Old Town Tavern, and I had put a trio together by that point. And then we were both really into this guy, Hound Dog Taylor. And Hound Dog Taylor is a Mississippi guy, lived in Chicago, really influenced by Elmore James, slide guitar player. And they would just turn their amps up all the way. Just so, like, fun and energetic. And I'm just like, this is it. So Dan pulls out this really cool looking, you know, Teisco guitar, and starts, you know, playing slide and stuff. I'm like, oh, cool, man. You know, sit in. We're going to play all the Hound Dog stuff off the Yellow record. And we did. So we got to be friends and, you know, playing gigs, you know, just playing bars, 10 to 2. Just having, you know, a great time. And, you know, he'd say, hey, do you know this, you know, Fred McDowell? Like, I'm like, oh, no, man, it's easy because it's in this tuning. He's like, well, this Tommy Johnson stuff. And I'm like, well, you can't play that because he's using drop D tuning. You know, you got to do this. And now it's all easy. And that kind of thing. And then he turned me on to Junior Kimbrough and a lot of those, like, Fat Possum Records guys that I hadn't known about yet. That was almost like psychedelic music. You know, and then he was off and running, and I remember listening to the Black Keys, that first album, The Big Come Up. He had just gotten the mixes. They had just been recording that week, and we were playing this little bar. So out on the break, we were sitting out in the car listening to it, and I was like, man, you got to help me out training your replacement. The electric 12-string, that's a cool guitar. This is a Hoyer electric 12-string, and it is just gnarly as can be. You know, it's like all this like these humongous switches. Like, you couldn't manufacture a switch like that to be affordable to put on an electric guitar. And, like, you know, like the metal knobs, like, it's so over-engineered.
What in the world?
Yeah, and the neck on this thing is just like a laminated, like, you could use it as a pry bar. It's just so slow, and just like the back neck plate to keep it stable. Like, I believe it's made by the Framus company, but it is a really cool guitar, and it has this thing, a mute that rests against the string, which really just, I don't know I don't know why that would be a thing you would want,
Clearly.
but it is. But yeah, it's an amazingly over-engineered instrument that I believe Hoyer was a German company, but I think these were all manufactured by the Framus guitar company.
Look at those pickups, though.
Oh, and they're awesome sounding. Those are very much like, I don't know who makes those, but they sound a lot like the Allman pickups, which are my favorite kind of pickups. And I work with a company. They take really good care of me called Lawler Pickups, and Jason Lawler is head of the company. But the guys over there, they're actually remaking the Allman pickup, and they're amazing. So play Lawler Pickups. You know, Nashville's not much bigger town than say like an Akron. You know, it's a little more condensed, and it's, you know, and the outlying parts are more spread out. But it's easy to get around. So, you know, and it's all us. It's all musicians. So there's always somebody playing somewhere, usually for free. And it's the best thing you've ever seen. It's so ridiculous that, you know, there's that much music in an urban area. This is a neat guitar. It's a Resonator guitar, made by Dean Guitars. Was endorsed by Dean Guitars, but Dad bought this in a music store, and I thought it was really cool because it has like a kind of a, you know, like completely out of tune. But because, you know, it's sort of acoustically amplified by the metal resonator in it, but it also has an electric pickup in it. Just a neat sounding guitar. I like it a lot.
At what point did you say, okay, it's time to leave Ohio and go where the industry is?
Well, I'd been thinking about it for close to 10 years, but I was just like, I want to stay here and stick it out. You know, and I saw the Keys had starting to become really successful being here, not even knowing, you know, the success that was to come for them. And plus, I liked living here. You know, I liked the people. It was comfortable. You know, I could tour out of here. It was fairly centrally located.
Right.
You know, but it's just the talent pool. It kept getting smaller and smaller. Guys who, you know, there's great players here, but not all of them can get away and tour. You know, like, hey, we're going to go, you know, you're going to want to go hop in the van, make $400 a week. You know, that's hard to do. You're going to definitely suffer for doing the job you love. The Zephyr was the first place that paid me when I was to play music. And it used to be a vegetarian restaurant when I was in college. And they had little folk music concerts. And they paid me once to open a show. And I made $75. I was just like, awesome.
Jackpot.
This is awesome. And it became a bar. And I'm playing blues. And then there was a point I was just like, I'm just going to play my music. And that scene supported it. It was a great school. And really just making me think about the presentation of it. Because if you're too loud, you just, you know, people just erase you. That you can't, it's like, ugh, it's annoying, and we're just going to go somewhere else. But if you're too quiet, you get swallowed. So it was really, that really taught me, you know, from playing there for so long, how to really present yourself as an entertainer. That is a cool, that's an old Epiphone. But that pickup there is made by a company called Teisco. It's a Japanese company, and those pickups are really, really cool sounding. But that was my first, you know, my dad had that, so it was my first foray into like trying to play in bars with like a microphone on an acoustic guitar. Was, you know, near utter failure. So he had that. I used that for a little bit until I could find one on my own. But frankly, I was in Cincinnati the other day, and I forgot to tell my dad. I've only ever seen that one. I found another one of them, exactly that model, the other day. Got it.
You got it.
So I think I'm gonna give it to him for Christmas.
Nice.
So, or keep it. Probably keep it. Like, I don't think any other place gets the seasons as much as Northeast Ohio does. We have a hot summer, a beautiful fall, gets cold in the winter. You know, it's rainy in spring. You know, but it's, you know, still be nice. It's a decent climate. You know, the winter's brutal. You know. And also that sort of like that Midwestern Rust Belt sort of like, I can take it. and this is, just to get a little, sociological on it, because the industry, why it's called the Rust Belt is because of all the iron industry and all the, rubber and things like that drew people from the South. It's the Great Southern Migration. So you bring your music with you. So there's a guitar player in Cleveland, a guy named Guitar Slim, not the famous Guitar Slim from Eddie Jones from New Orleans, but Guitar Slim. He's played at the Cascade Lounge for over 20 years. It's deep in the hood, like right near Huff. In Cleveland, and I could never go up there as a kid, like in the late '80s and early '90s. It was just really dangerous, and but I made friends later on in the mid 2000s. I made friends with this guitar player, Moonshine Pete Schmidt, and he's a white dude. Is married to a black lady who was Slim's niece. And Pete, I'd seen play with some friends of mine, harmonica player, really, great natural harp player. And he would sit in on this gig I had, and he was like, well, man, you got to come up. It's Slim's birthday party, and then we're going to go, and he's the guy who also took me over to my hero's house, Robert Jr. Lockwood, who I'll get to in a second. But he took me to Slim's birthday party, and he said, yeah, man, bring an amp, we'll play, and, we'll play with Slim. And Slim plays he's a really powerful singer, and he plays guitar in standard tuning and plays slide. So it's really like Robert Nighthawk or like Muddy Waters, like that kind of player. And we go into this fire trap of a, humongous 3-story house in right off of Huff, and God, I wish I could remember that street. I don't even know if that neighborhood's still there anymore. But we knock on the door, and there's a kid, in sweats and high tops, working the door, and it's like, looks over, just points up the stairs, and he locks the door, and we walk up there, and Slim's got a joint running up there. There's tables along the wall in this sort of like wide, large attic room. It's got the mics and the band playing, and he's selling beer and moonshine right there. And I'm in downtown Cleveland, or right near downtown Cleveland. I'm like, I haven't seen something like this except in like on the outskirts of Clarksdale or in Greenwood or somewhere like that in Mississippi. I was like, this is awesome. I could not believe it. I was like, we played all day. And he just killed it, man. Killed it. I'm like, this exists? So I was just, it was like, man, this is the real thing. Robert Jr. Lockwood. They called him Robert Jr. because this guitar player came to town, started dating his mom, and was hanging out, but, this is a young cat. So Robert was probably, Robert Jr. was probably around 16 or so, maybe a little younger, and this cat named Robert Johnson, who's dating his mama, they were closer in age than Robert Johnson was to Robert Jr.'s mom. So Robert Johnson directly taught Robert Lockwood the guitar, and he's the guy. So he's sort of this sort of missing link, mythical character. But he also got a reputation as being sort of grouchy because people would just ask him stupid questions all the time about Robert Johnson. Whereas Robert Lockwood has had this amazing long career, has been all over the world, has been a guitar player, excellent, and is one of the underrated guys that bring a jazz influence to blues guitar playing. Really swinging, very literate, very, and always, always looking for a new sound, but and very musical, really swinging. It just really is the missing link. He's one of my favorite guitar players. And then again, played on so many blues hits. My Babe, all the heavy hitter Little Walter stuff, all the heavy hitter Sonny Boy Williamson stuff, which people think are the holy grail of blues. He's the guy backing them up. And he would held down a Wednesday night gig at Fat Fish Blue, and I would go see him a lot whenever I could. It's about an hour from here. I'd drive up, watch him, and he played with this big band. Then occasionally he'd do 1 or 2 tunes by himself, which is just killer. And he would do, a Robert Johnson song or one of his, and so I got to open some shows for him. And, you know, my dad is a washed-up bass player as well, and I mentioned that. So we would do some gigs together. And when he would play around, and Dad was always hanging. If I played with Robert, Dad would always be like, "Oh, I'm going." You know, he's great. And it was really he got to be, you know, he was a really very nice, sweet man. Once he got to, because I was interested about, you know, I'd read everything I could about Robert Johnson, and I think about, like, if people asked me about stuff that happened when I was 16 years old for the rest of my life, especially when there's all this lies and mythology attached to it. Whereas, honestly, this was one of his friends who died really young and was murdered really young, you know. And that, I think, people fail to realize the humanness of this guy. Like, you know, that's, you know, I don't care how old you are. If that happens to a friend of ours, that is not going to be a good memory. That is not going to be framed in a good way. Now I realized, you know, time heals all wounds. So I was really sensitive to that. I was like, I don't want to bug him about Robert Johnson. So I'd ask him about other guys. Like, I was really into piano players and trying to, like, steal licks from piano players and stuff. And he was really into that too. So he was, you know, he had just told me whatever I wanted to know. And he'd like, wait, let me remember it. And he was a really sharp guy, very in shape, you know, was really very sweet. And then when my dad would be around, he really said this, he's like, he held my hand and he said, you know, Robert never had a dad like you had. And it just killed me. He said, that's real special. That's real nice. You do that. I'm like, oh my God. Like, all this time, all that guy's done. And he's like, man, I wish I had that. Like, just destroyed me. So you know, he's a saint in my book. But what I'm getting at is like, people ask him about all these things, and they're asking about this one, like, 5 year, maybe 5 years, probably 4 years between that time before Robert, you know, he died when he was like 26, when he got poisoned. So he got to know me. I was familiar with him. My friend Pete took me over to his house, and I got to sit knees to knees with Robert and play his guitar, and I played him one of his songs, which is like I forget which one it was, but I had practiced it and I had nailed it. And I was just like, this is the shit. And I played it. He's like, and I think his son was in the room, and they were laughing. They're like, look at him, you know. And like, you know, I mean, encouraging, not not at all. And they're like, you know, like, you hit a lick, and he's like, you know, kid's got it. And he was like, he's like, man, this played great. He said, you know, he put his hand on my knee, and he's like, they already got one Robert. I was just crushed. Like, I'm like, he's like, no. He said, you know, no, man, you know, that's great. He said, but that's an old story. You're a young man. You need to have new stories.
So a light bulb went off.
Bam. Songwriting. That's what I have to do. My dad has this thing where he's been doing it since before I was born. Like, when he gets a new guitar, and he'll play it, and he'll just sort of, Mom doesn't necessarily know that he keeps buying guitars. And it's not as if it's like a financial burden, but she's like, you have more guitars. You don't need any more guitars. It's ridiculous. It's just taking up space. Whereas Dad's response is, no, I had this before we were married.
I don't know. She might have a point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's a lot. And she'll get it. The news broken to her before this comes out. So, but this is a brand new guitar that Dad's had since before they were married. That's really hard to say when you've been married for over 40 years. So I don't think my mom's buying it so much anymore.
The song "Them Shoes," I think everyone that knows you knows the story. Made the Pandora radio station. Why "Them Shoes"? Why was it that song?
No friggin' idea, man. No idea whatsoever.
I guess their secret algorithms chose that.
I guess, you know, like, at the time, till people started really, like, song was just about out of the set. It wasn't, like, essential. I mean, you know, you play, like, the newer songs off, you know, and we were like, yeah, this is a good, you know, it's a nice rocker. It's in G, you know, so it's pretty easy to play. You know, it's in an open tuning, so and
now you have to play it.
Oh, I mean, we can't even I've tried playing it earlier in the set, and then people just leave, so I have to wait, until the end. It's
All right.
But yeah, and but I don't know why. It just because it was pretty much out of the set up and for about almost a year before the Pandora radio phenomenon sort of started catching up.
How do the download sales of Them Shoes compare to the rest of the catalog?
Downloads of Them Shoes outsells the entire catalog combined by 2,000%. Most of my income is from
madness.
Is from Them Shoes.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Like when I wrote that song, I was I had that little melody in my head, and just wanted sort of like a real Delta-y kind of sounding song that had that melody, and that was just sort of what happened. I do write, there's songs like After a While or like things like that are, sort of similar in feel, or at least in I mean, I guess that one's a bit faster and is more sort of almost a shuffle swing beat, whereas that one is just straight rock backbeat. But I just don't think of it in terms that way. I thought like a song like Working for You, I think is just a much more catchier song.
Great music video, by the way.
Thanks.
You make
my acting debut.
Yeah. You have some acting chops, man.
Yeah.
Very convincing vacuum cleaner salesman.
Thanks.
Not so convincing as a sexy blonde lady, though.
I look like Gregg Allman in drag. Like the bad, Coke bloat Gregg Allman, too. It wasn't like the healthy-looking Gregg Allman. No, it was bad.
Why is tape so important to record on for you?
For me, it's not do or die, but I really like the way tape sounds. It has a mellowness, and it sort of it compresses things a little bit in a very pleasing way. Like when drums hit tape, bass hit tape, sounds very present, and you can crank it up loud without it sounding sharp or kind of stabby or ear fatiguing. And it's just the sounds that that I idolize and emulate. Those the technology was tape. Now I love some great records that are recorded totally digitally. Like my Come On Come Here record is really recorded digitally. It was on DAT tape, but we were using ribbon mics from the 40s and 50s, old tube amps, all that stuff, and we were all in one room. We're all playing at once, no overdubs. You can do it, but also that because the tape is rolling, it's it's expensive. So you think you sort of have to step up your game. You have to perform. And I've always felt my favorite records were capturing performances on tape. So, and just capturing a good performance. So that's the way, that's my point of view. That's not a law. That's not, and you can, get graphs and charts and like how the compression, is like it matches up and you can make it fine. But I just like the vibe, more so than anything. I feel like it makes you perform, you've got a finite amount of time, and you've got to do it right. If something's wrong, you have to stop, go back and fix it and do the whole thing. And I just think it's sort of, the pressure of it sort of elevates your game more so to get a better live performance out of you.
What do you miss most about living in Ohio?
Well, I'm family for the most part, getting to see my mom and dad all the time. That's big. I was talking to a friend of mine before the show yesterday. He's like, yep, Akron has not changed, and Massillon has not changed. I was back here for the Massillon-McKinley game, and it's awesome, man, to go, to be in a place that you're like, this hasn't, become a craft brewery, this is just the Alibi bar, same, it's, the Hideaway, things like that are just like, or, going up to Akron, Musica has been there for a good long while, and, those little places, Highland Square, the Matinee, all that stuff, they're all still there, all still hangouts. The Zephyr, still a hangout, like, see mom and dad, and it's just, it's comfortable. It's so cheap to live here. I miss that. Like, there's nowhere else cheaper on earth to live than in Northeast Ohio. Like, maybe not even Detroit anymore, because now it's, they're having their comeback, but it's great, people are nice, there's not really any traffic or anything like that. the people who complain about Nashville traffic have obviously never been to Atlanta.
Right. Nashville is great to drive in.
It's great.
The rent, though, now that we mentioned that, it's interesting that Nashville's becoming, well, it has been, but it's becoming this.
It's the it city.
And so rent is sort of, now where do you see, what's going to happen to that city when all of a sudden it's maybe a little too expensive for creatives to, that
we're just going to move farther out.
Yeah, just disperse slightly.
I mean, just, they'll move up into Madison or Donaldson or something, it's
always there, right?
It's there. It's a shame that, again, they're sort of pricing a lot of people out of, my neighborhood, because it's a really, it was a pretty lonely first couple years, but now I feel like, I know people in town, I know friends, and they're and you just run into people, because it's a neighborhood, there's little bars and restaurants all in my little neighborhood, and I walk, everywhere if I go out,
What is this, what is that concert ticket? What is the significance of that?
This one?
Kent State Folk Festival.
The Kent State Folk Festival. That was the folk festival Dad and I, he took me to, as a kid, and how I really got into wanting to play music. That was when Tom Paxton was the headliner, who was a folk singer, songwriter, that Dad and I were big fans of, and we were at another festival in Cuyahoga Valley, and we were just jamming in the hotel room, and Tom Paxton wandered in, and I was a kid, probably, 18 or 19 or something like that, and we were just picking, having a great time, and he walked in and was like, "Hey, it sounds really good," and it was like, "Oh my God, it's Tom Paxton." So I was told to my dad it was the best day of my life. So when he came he saved the ticket for when he came to the Kent Folk Festival.
So last night you played Franny's Blues. You played a bunch of old stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a lyric in that line, "I want it all. Be goddamned if I don't have it."
Yeah, be goddamned if I don't get it. That's something my dad, he said, "Oh, be goddamned if he doesn't get it." That's a direct quote, Mark Sweany quote.
So did you get it all?
Nobody gets it all, man. That's, I just, it's just that sort of, I don't know, that song's really more about, what you want isn't necessarily what you get,
Yeah.
And, it's okay to want it, though, it's having the desire to keep going and to want more and to want, more out of life is that's okay. You can't have it all,
It never changes, does it?
No, I mean like that. It's all. You could go deep philosophical. I want it all. Like some sort of weird Orson Welles kind of character. This is a picture of my dad playing in. It might have been my first communion, maybe my older brother's first communion, but that was when he played in the folk group in church. And that is just a cool-looking chimpanzee.
Well, it's great talking to you.
Hey, well, great talking to you, Nick. Thank you for doing this, man. Thanks for, coming out to the old homestead here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Being so hospitable.
Here in Graceland North,
A nice, dreary, overcast
Ohio day. Perfect gray winter Ohio weather. Awesome.
Exactly.
4:30 is a bad place to be. Well, you sure to be tired, 'cause you ought to be asleep. Well, awaken, unshaken, out of your tree. Wide awake at 4:30.
Yes, there will be a new record in 2015. I am supposed to be working on it right now. So hopefully we'll go in the studio in February. And hopefully those songs will be finished in January. Dear God, do I hope those songs are finished in January. Man, do I have to write a bunch of songs by January. So yeah, do you want to get me having a little panic attack on tape now? For the viewers at home?